Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inclusion Starts Now, the podcast. I am so excited you're here because today I am talking to Greg, who has created a simple way to teach people how to make adaptive toys with the toys that are on Target shelves, Walmart shelves, everywhere. And so he has all of his information up like for free on social media, but he also has a book that helps you like learn how to do it yourself. So he is like the prime example of how not to gatekeep amazing information that he has. Um, and I'm just so excited for you to hear about our conversation today. Today's episode is sponsored by Christmas and the holiday season, and giving me some sort of joy that I need to know that there is community and love and people out there who are working to make this world a better place. And if that is the only thing that I can hold on to today, I am going to take it and ride this wave as long as I can. So enjoy the episode. I would love to hear your story on how this all started.
Yeah, sure. So my daughter has disabilities, and she started with her therapies with some switch adapted toys and switches, and that was my first introduction to any of this kind of technology. And I was real interested in getting her more of these toys and switches because she was doing really well at the time with those modalities. And so, I asked how much these things cost, and quickly found out that like a Switch is incredibly expensive,
Yeah.
especially the kind that she needed. She needed one that was more sensitive, a little bit low profile. So once I figured out that these things were really expensive, it would have been hard for us or our therapist to like get more. So I kind of I wanted to figure out why these things were expensive. So I immediately took apart that switch and
Yeah.
realized pretty quickly that it was a very simple device. And once I found out that I could buy the little switches on Amazon, I bought like 100
Yeah.
and just started. I bought a 3D printer and I started to try to make my own switches that she could test out. It had like
Oh my
different
gosh.
textures and things. Um, And then I quickly turned to like the toys. Like she was getting a few toys from the therapists, and I wanted to have more because she was definitely enjoying playing with these toys that were Switch adapted. And again, started to take apart a few toys and realized again it's a really simple thing. And I just couldn't understand why, when you went online to try to find some, like the first place I went, instinctively was like Amazon, and those things are incredibly expensive on Amazon. They're expensive on other websites, like major companies sell them, and also like kind of mom and pop
Yeah.
shops sell them, and they're
How
also
much are
expensive.
they? Like, how much are these
Um,
toys? What would you consider expensive, I guess?
uh, so a good example is there's a toy, I might even have one here. It's kind of It's actually kind of in part in pieces right now, but it's like a little MP3 kind of player thing that
Oh,
plays
yeah.
music. Um, you can buy these at like Target for $9, and I've seen them sold for $70 adapted.
Oh, wow.
That's what I call expensive.
Yeah.
And certainly there is,
No, that is expensive. A $70 toy. Like,
yeah.
I I would not spend that much money on a
Well,
toy for my
and
kids.
even I've seen them for 40, $50. That's considerably less, but still way more than the original cost of the device.
Yeah.
And so, and there's a whole range of this. And I post a lot about this on my Instagram, how expensive things are, and give comparisons because I think sometimes these sellers think that we're stupid and can't Google
Yeah.
the original cost of a toy. Um, Certainly there are like proprietary toys that bigger companies make specifically, and those are incredibly expensive, but there are places where it's literally off the shelf toys that they probably get, um, uh they buy them in bulk or something, get a they don't, obviously pay what we pay into the store, so they're making even more profit on these toys. Um, and what I found out was how simple it was to exploit these toys and adapt them myself. Um, the resources for adapting toys when I first started looking into this felt really limited. There were maybe a few YouTube videos that showed it, um, but nothing super comprehensive that I felt you could go from like a beginner to being able to adapt one in sort of one place. So that's what kind of prompted me to write my book, Let's Adapt for Everyone. It as far as I can tell, is kind of the first of its kind guide to this skill,
And what
or
is your book
learning the
called?
skill. Let's Adapt for Everyone.
Okay.
I don't have a copy in front of me that I can show up, but I have I sell it on my website, um, adapted-design.com.
Okay.
And it's been received really well. Some universities have used it, as part of their toolkit for teaching
That's
people.
awesome.
Lots of parents and families and therapists and educators have also purchased it, and they use it to have their own kind of adapting parties and clinics and things.
So this book
Um,
like teaches you how to make toys adaptable.
yeah, so like the one that I showed here, I think this is actually in the book, but one like this is in there that shows you step by step exactly how to do it. Um, and
Wow.
I think it's important to show that because I feel like it's a gate kept
Yeah.
skill. There's quite a lot of people that can do it, but there's not as many people showing how to do it. And at the end of the day, it's very easy. Once you learn how to do a few, you start to learn how to do, you can, deploy that to lots of other kinds. I think this last this Halloween, there seem to always be like in Home Depot these little plush toys that have like a try me button on them. I don't know if you've ever seen those,
Yeah.
but you just on the box, a little button you press. Those are the easiest to adapt because that little try me button has two wires going to it. All you have to do is
Yeah.
cut those two wires and with one of those little female mono jack cables, um, you can then just wire to that and plug
Yeah.
in an accessible switch. So it's very, very easy, and it can all be done with like twisting wires and some tape. You don't need anything fancy like soldering.
Yeah. And how did you learn to do all this? Did you go to school for this or just grew up taking things apart and figuring out like how they work?
Yeah, so I'm a licensed architect professionally. So I am always kind of curious about solving problems. That's kind of my job in my profession, is just kind of solving problems and making things legible for people to build. And so this kind of was a similar thing where the problem is, how do you optimize this toy for someone who has disabilities, and then make it accessible and easy to understand, how to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've always been interested in taking apart things. I think it's only been recently that I've been good about putting them back together. Um, but the, um, the process of taking them apart and putting them back together, uh, I've learned quite a lot just by kind of trial and error. I mean, that, like I said, there weren't very many resources for me to um, learn this process. And a lot of times these like YouTube videos are very long and very kind of
Yeah.
difficult to follow and can kind of be discouraging. And I think what I've heard is a lot of people have felt that um, the way that I have taught this process for adapting is straightforward. I had the great opportunity to teach a clinic with the local school district here. Um, and we had about 30 educators and therapists where we adapted one of those sort of dancing cacti things.
Yeah.
Um,
We used to
and
have one
so
of those.
yeah, yeah. Uh, so the as soon as we got to like the point where they were testing it, I had someone come up and they were like, "That's it? That's all this is?" They were so shocked how simple this was, and if you've never been if you've never been if it's never been shown to you, sure, it's going to be a very sort of intimidating thing. But as soon as you see it, you're like, wow, that's all it is. Um,
Yeah.
and so I love that response because that is all it is, and that's why it's so strange to have it be gate kept, and then for it to then be so expensive because the cable is like $1,
Yeah.
a little bit of electrical tape, maybe some solder. Um, it's not that expensive. And so, like the first example, that $9 toy adapted at cost should only be like $11,
Yeah.
not $70. And so, my and this is something that kind of Wes and I connected on was just the exploitation of the cost of these things.
Yeah.
He was very interested. I've spoken to him quite a bit about this, but he was very interested in like why are these things expensive? What makes them expensive? And lots of people have asked that. Like it's so easy to break down. Um, it's not very much material. It's just knowing how to go into there and open up these toys.
Yeah.
Um, and the amount of time, it doesn't take very much time, really. It's like once you've figured out or you have a guidebook, it's really just like opening up the toy and doing it.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it feels like these businesses are just hoping that we will be lazy enough to not want to figure it out.
yeah, I think
Like,
they definitely thrive on that.
yeah. I mean, yeah, 'cause that definitely was my first question of like, why do you think these toys are so expensive? And I mean, it feels like, especially going into having a small business myself, and trying not to be a huge consumer, which obviously, no, I definitely just struggle with. Um, I've been trying to figure out like how to connect with people to like get them to buy like my books or something. But I mean, it's like that. I have a really hard time pricing things too high because I just feel so bad. I'm like, I don't know, we're all struggling trying to buy things. And then this toy comes out that's like, is your kid not talking? This toy is very like, what an incentive for them to start talking. And it's like all this, I feel like there's a lot of fear.
Yeah.
And this is how I feel a lot about uh, the disabled community in general, that parents have all this fear because everyone's kind of scaring them of like,
Mhm.
the medical system is like, well, look at all this, like all these battles in front of you, and then the school system, and like, look at all these hoops you're going to have to jump through, um, which is very scary. So if there's a $70 toy that's going to bring your kid joy, you're just like, I don't even care. Just do it. Just buy it so we can like, get to play with these toys that everyone else gets to play with.
Yeah. It
Um,
totally preys on our desperation because I felt it myself. When I first got into this, so I did buy an expensive a Switch because I didn't think that there was any other options. I did
yeah.
buy an expensive adapted toy because I didn't think that there were other options until I started to go in this direction.
And by
It,
switch, are those the ones like it's like a button that you're pressing?
yeah,
Or do you want to ex
yeah,
maybe explain a switch
yeah.
for
So
the listeners?
a Switch is a very simple device. Essentially, there's two wires that go to this little mechanical switch inside of the plastic sort of housing that's next to the button. Usually, the button is kind of a much bigger thing that you see that you actually press. But all it's doing is when you press down, it's closing that electrical connection, and when you release, it opens it up. And that's enough to uh, make the toy activate, which is the same kind of thing that's happening to this is the button on board the original toy. It's essentially just a little electrical button or mechanical button, and all you're doing is kind of like making it external to the toy so that it can be closer to the user, and it can be,
Yeah.
any sort of specific kind of switch that you want.
Okay, yeah, because I've also heard I we used to use a lot of I think they're called Big Macs or Big Buttons.
Yeah.
I feel like they're called
Mhm.
Big Macs. I don't know. And I think that was the one with the audio too, where like it
Yeah.
would like be, like I have to go potty or I need food. It was like a
Mhm.
one thing that was always gonna say that. But whenever I recommended it to schools, I mean, yeah, they were just like, how much is it? Like
Mhm.
another thing we have to pay for.
Yeah.
Where it's like, yeah, schools are struggling too. So why are these big businesses thriving off of people who like need support?
Well, that's a great point too, because that clinic that I taught, the teachers, one of the teachers actually went and did the math, and they're like, we I don't remember how much it was, but they were like, we saved, thousands of dollars today by doing this, adapting ourselves, because they know how much these things are, and usually they don't have budgets for, you know,
Yeah,
stuff like this, so it might be coming out of their pocket. So you're putting teachers and therapists, into their own pocketbook to provide these toys. And with my daughter as an example, is some of the toys that were brought to her didn't work out. That she didn't engage with them or didn't like them. So if you only have two in your classroom or your clinic, and they don't like those
yeah,
two, you've completely lost the ability to make that connection. But if you have a library of them that didn't cost you a lot of money, more options are better, because then you can kind of
yeah,
like try lots of things. Um, but obviously that's expensive if you're buying from people that are specifically trying to make money off of you. And you talked about your own business and trying to price things fairly. And I think, I see these things as being essential, because this my daughter can't play with other toys that aren't adapted.
yeah,
So if you don't provide those, then they have nothing to play, and play is extremely important.
yeah,
So
definitely.
these things are like bottles of water during a hurricane. You're gross if you're you know taking water that should be like $1 for a bottle and making it $10 a bottle during crisis. And so this
Yeah,
is totally the same thing, and I find it really disturbing, because a lot of these sellers have a connection to this community. Um, like they might be a therapist themselves, or they might have a grandchild that has disability, or they could be a parent that also has disability. And so I always find it so um, strange that these same people that are very connected to this community are then imposing a disability tax on their friends.
yeah,
Um, and I cannot see how that rationale makes sense. You know that these people are struggling because you are very close to that same struggle, and yet you're still trying to make extra money from people on these things that I deem essential. I mean, there's many other ways that you can make money on things that aren't essential, that are fun, but
yeah.
these things are essential, and you're making huge profit on these things, and I just find that wrong.
Oh, definitely. Well, I love the word that what you just said about it being essential, where it's like the water metaphor of like there's a storm or something, so now it's like water, which is what some like which was what everybody needs,
Mhm.
and now you're upselling or upcharging to just basically profit yourself. And I mean, I feel like that's just a huge problem in general that people, it seems to be that people are really afraid that they can't afford things. And so then they in turn have to like make these prices like so incredibly high that it just doesn't make sense. Yeah, I think this is so amazing that you have put your knowledge like in a way that people can access it. So you have your book, and then do you also have like YouTube videos out? I'll make sure to like link everything in the show notes below too for you.
Sure, yeah. So I have the book, and I sort of originally started doing these kind of mini videos on my Instagram, where it's like usually 12 to 15 steps of going through adapting one toy. I'm preparing for a presentation in a few days, And so I collected all the screenshots of all the reels that I made on my Instagram, and it's amazing. I've done over 50, and
Oh,
I've only been
wow.
doing this for 2 years. So
Yeah.
that's that's one one a month for the last 2 years. And uh, it's been really great to be able to share that information because there have been lots of people reaching out that say like, oh, I did that Elmo toy adaptation based on your tutorial, or I'll show it and then someone will be like, well, because usually I'll do these for a family, like they'll reach out and say I'd love to have um, this toy adapted, and so I'll do the adapting, and then while I'm doing it, I'll make a tutorial. So it's kind of a two for one, like someone's getting a adapted toy, and then everyone else is getting how I did it.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, it's been a great process. Those are kind of the two main ways that I've been able to share that information.
That's so awesome. And I love that you're doing like every toy you've mentioned, I have seen. I mean, as a
Hmm.
former teacher and as a parent of two small children, I mean, you'd keep naming toys that are like the hot commodities in a
Hmm.
toddler playroom,
Yeah.
which is just so great. How old, if you don't mind me asking, how old is your child now?
She's almost 5.
Okay. My kids are 4 and 2.5.
Okay.
And yeah, their play is so important. I'm actually on the board for the Recess Project, and it's all about inclusive play, but it's focused more on playgrounds at schools.
Hmm.
And so we just raise money to get a piece of inclusive playground equipment for a school and then like help them with the whole process of putting it in and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but starting that process, it's made me think a lot about play and how people kind of just take it for granted.
Hmm.
Like they don't really, um, they're just like, go play or something, where it's like we kind of forget that I would even like typically and um, atypically developing children, like they need help, they need support,
Hmm.
like learning how to play with each other and learning how to get access to everything that's around them. Um, which again,
And
it's so cool.
yeah, and to kind of to that point, an adapted toy is not some sort of departure from the toy. It's actually making it more accessible for everyone because older people that might have mobility issues can then use the toy.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Babies who are just kind of figuring things out might not know how to exploit a toy because they don't quite understand buttons yet, but like a big switch in front of them, they understand. And so it's been interesting to see that, it's not just for children. Play
Yeah.
or just engaging with a device is not exclusive to children. Like it actually can benefit the entire household. Even like dogs and stuff and pets can figure out a
Yeah.
button too. So it's kind of a universal thing, and minimizing it as a thing is or making it kind of other is not really helpful because if every toy could be adapted or came with like a little port to plug into, that just expands how many people can actually use this thing.
Yeah. Oh my
Um,
gosh, what a brilliant idea. Like that is the easiest thing to just add a port that you can connect your switch to. And I
mhm,
mean, everyone could access it. And I love that you said pets because I know I've definitely seen those dog videos of the dogs pushing the buttons
mhm,
to say they want to go for a walk.
yeah.
And yeah, I mean, how fun would that be for kids who have dogs or cats or whatever to like touch
Mhm.
the button and play with the toy too? And yeah, with the inclusive play with just like older generations. I mean, we are living the longest we've ever lived. And so there are a lot more disabilities for older people. And it's like, don't they still want access to everything? Like,
Mhm.
and that's like with, again, the inclusive playgrounds. Like, it's kind of wild to me how many adults have come out and been like, I use a wheelchair, and it is so nice that I can now get on the playground like with my child.
Hmm.
So yeah, just giving that access to everyone. It seems it's so nice. This is definitely like the conversation I needed to have today to just remind myself that there are so many people like out here fighting and educating um, of just like how to increase inclusive practices. I think this is so great, everything that you're doing.
Thanks.
How often do people connect with you to make a toy accessible for their child?
There's definitely sort of ebbs and flows, but it could be as frequent as once a week. A new sort of project comes on my table. I think what's been great about the because I don't have a store that's kind of uh normally has tons of things in stock. A lot of the things are kind of like if I adapt something that doesn't necessarily have um, a customer already lined up, that might go onto my website and become available for people. Um, and so by doing that, I've been able to have these kind of one-offs that have been kind of cool and maybe something people haven't seen before. A really cool one that I has kind of started off the things that were kind of less toy and kind of more other devices was this bead spinner device. It's like a little rotating drum that you put beads into, and there's like a little needle that as it rotates, it sort of threads it automatically.
Oh,
A
cool.
really simple like electronic device, um, but was really cool because this family wanted to be able to make friendship bracelets for a Taylor Swift concert, and was able to do that once I was able to figure out how to push adapt this thing. And I saw video of them using it, and it was amazing because their friends were all making friendship bracelets for the concert, and so why shouldn't their kid be able to do that too? And so
Yeah.
what an amazing way to kind of bring everyone onto the same level of being able to make this one little kind of craft, um, and be able to participate fully. And so something like that I think is really cool because it's not really a toy. It's almost like a skill, a craft kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and they might then be able to take that craft or skill and that might become their thing as they grow up.
Yeah.
Because I think another important thing with some of these other non-toy things that I've adapted is like these kids will grow up one day and will want to have skills and hobbies and
Hobbies.
things.
Yeah.
Um, you know, there's like a vegetable peeler that I did a while ago. What a great way to kind of participate in like Thanksgiving meal prep and things.
Yeah. Wait, so what'd you do for the vegetable peeler?
That was kind of very similar, very easy to exploit the uh, the thing you just sort of put like a potato on it and you hold down and the thing just sort of spins, taking the skin off the potato as it rotates. Very cool device, and I think you can buy those for like $20 on Amazon.
Yeah.
Um, Another one that I found that is also being sold on some sites for like $70, which again is just so frustrating because someone's not going to buy that because of the cost.
Yeah.
And so that child might not be able to participate in that meal prep because of that. What a silly
Yeah.
thing. Like if it's $25, then someone easily is easily going to be able to
Yeah.
like afford that, and then that kid is going to be able to have that experience, or adult or whatever. Like it just seems so wrong to make that so limiting because of cost. These
Yeah.
people should have access to this, and so that's why I just think it's really important to always just do this at cost.
Yeah. Well, what I love is that you're not gatekeeping any of it too, is that you're
Hmm.
figuring it out and then sharing it with everybody
Yeah,
so then they can do it. Like yeah. I mean, I hope
exactly.
you're also charging something for your time to it.
A little bit, not very much.
Yeah. That's how I feel a lot too. Um, I wanted to ask, what is your like most favorite one that you've adapted for someone?
Um, well, I recently so for this presentation I'm doing at the University of Washington, I've sort of in my presentation set aside some projects that were that involve some of the 3D printing. So they're adapting plus 3D printing because there's um, what I'm trying to say. There was a family that reached out last holiday season about doing like a turntable record player thing, and so I wasn't too familiar with how those things worked, and so I bought one, took it apart, and realized that the majority of the turntable is mechanical. So like there's not that much electronic stuff going on. And so
Mhm.
adapting is usually kind of like exploiting an electrical connection to make things work. But the turntable is more like a clock where there's lots of things kind of mechanically moving around. Um, and so what I was able to do was I knew a little bit of programming and I had like like a Raspberry Pi Pico microcontroller that I could program. Um, they're called servos that they kind of can be controlled to move in certain directions. And so with my super limited experience with that, I was able to make those servos kind of do a little flick with the controller. Um, and so that was then switch adapted so that when you hit a button, you could make one flick for the start button, and then the other switch, you could make it flick for the stop button. And
Yeah,
um, so I was able to put all that inside of this turntable. So when you hit the start button, the little tone arm lifts up and then automatically goes over to the record and drops down and then starts playing.
yeah,
And so this allowed this child to be able to access their family's record collection because they love music and they want to be able to share it with um, their kiddo, and so what an amazing way to do that with
yeah,
this collection because there's something about the mechanical aspect of it, like being able to see it move around and the kind of just like the moving of the arm and stuff, how the record players kind of operate. That's so much more interesting than just like a CD player or something. Because
yeah,
you can adapt a CD player, but like being able to use these old records, being able to use this kind of mechanical device, um, I think is a really cool experience. And I mean, I just kind of imagine like one day this kid, because of this device, could become a DJ.
yeah,
You know, with all of their sort of potential and all of their interests and stuff, like this could be their thing. And so being able to figure this out, adapt it, and provide it to them, I think is awesome because I'd love to know that one day, like them and other kids could be, you know, DJs with disability and the price wasn't the barrier to it.
yeah. I think that is so great. I think it's when you were saying the little knowledge that you had on like mechanical items, and then you said a bunch of words that I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And not a bunch of words. There was like two or three that I was like, I could not even tell you what that means. So I feel like even though it seems like such minimal knowledge to you, you sharing that information to like the average person, I think is just so helpful and is going to help so many families. And I hope more families get connected with you after they hear this because I think what you're doing is just like that's just so great. And then I loved what you said about like that this child, could be a DJ someday. Like they're interested in music. You just found like, the child has an interest and then you just found a way to make it accessible, which is
Mhm.
like such a huge part of like inclusive practices and building genuine peer relationships. I like, reminding everyone that kids with disabilities still have interests and likes and dislikes, and they could be very similar to somebody in the class, and then they can be friends and be DJs together and,
Yeah.
run the world. Um, well, that is so cool. And I really appreciate you coming on here and talking to me about all of this. Is there anything else that you would like listeners to know about adaptive play or your services or anything?
Well, you mentioned the Recess Project, and I have kind of over the last year started to review parks for accessibility and inclusive design. As an architect and as someone who is bringing a child to these spaces, I think it's really important to make these playgrounds more inclusive, more accessible. Because what I found is that the first park that we went to with her was all over the paper, and it was advertised as a new inclusive park. They had a ribbon cutting and everything was really special. And so we were like, "Oh, let's go check it out," because we've never been to one. And so when we got there, um, the parking lot had no accessible stalls.
Really?
The the so the asphalt parking lot to the sidewalk to get up to the playground had no curb cut.
Oh my gosh.
And once we got there, the actual playground was quite small, and there was only like a saucer swing that we could kind of use.
Yeah.
And so it was a bust. And so after that experience, I then started to like seek out all the kind of inclusive parks and just parks in general nearby us, and started to um, review them with a very like specific rubric of criteria, and started to realize like there's not very many parks that really live up to being inclusive.
Yeah.
And so I've got like a star rating system where like 5 stars is great. And there are like maybe two that I've given 5 stars to, but for the most part, even ones that market themselves as inclusive, some have gotten 2 stars or 1 star,
Yeah.
because they just really missed the mark. And
Oh
it
my
could
gosh.
just,
Is this shared somewhere? Where do you have this
yeah,
information?
this is on my website and on Instagram.
Okay.
And it's yeah, I'm trying to think of how many parks, but quite a few parks I've reviewed in kind of the Washington State area. And I go through things like more recently I've been kind of more critical about elopement barriers for children, like if there's a gated enclosure around the playground, because I went to this really cool park near Snoqualmie Falls, and brand new, uh, or it was kind of redone, but it was all brand new. But there was like no, they had the ribbon cutting, they'd finished it, but they didn't paint any accessible parking markings.
Yeah.
So that that was strange. But then the um the playground was really close to the parking lot and did have a fence around it, but had two big openings that led right into the parking lot. And while
Yeah.
we were there playing on it and reviewing it, a kid disappeared, and they had
Yeah.
wandered right into the parking lot and were on the other side of the parking lot. And it took a few minutes for the family to kind of identify where they were. But it was scary. It wasn't very busy
Yeah.
that day, but that's the first time that we'd ever really seen that happen, where they just kind of walked off. Um, and so like the design of these is really important for things like that, because um, the child might have had hearing issues and couldn't hear,
Yeah.
the parents yelling for them, or just the way that it was arranged. You kind of have these blind spots that you could easily lose track of them, because like um, of where the benches were versus where the openings to the parking lot were. Um, and so that's been really important. But also just things like you probably come across this with the Recess Project, but like providing one swing is not very helpful, because one size of swing isn't going to fit very many people.
Yeah.
Um, but then also providing two swings but are the same is not very helpful, because if you provide two, you should provide two different sizes, because there's people that are smaller and people that are bigger that that are going to use these
Yeah.
as well. So I think a lot of people think that, checking the box, like, oh, I've got an inclusive swing is enough. But thinking about like people that are actually going to use this
Yeah.
is really important too.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a lot of I mean flooring seems to be a really big issue
Mhm.
because especially since moving to Washington, it's like a lot of wood chips,
Yeah.
which is not like accessible for people who use walkers or wheelchairs or canes. And then what you were saying about like the gated in playgrounds, like that was something that actually came up recently that I went to a an inclusive playground near where I live and I was like posting videos about it and someone responded being like, "Well, that looks like a huge park and there's no fence. Like I wouldn't be able to go there because my child, will run away from the park and that's not very inclusive for us." And I was like, "Wow."
Mhm.
What like I find I'm thinking like it's so inclusive for so many people, but yet there still was something missing for like
Mhm.
really everyone to be included there. And I do feel like I see with inclusive playgrounds a lot that they start getting really big because they're trying not to do so many like stairs and up, like they're trying not to make it up this way.
Mhm.
It's like they're making it wider. But then because of that, there's like I don't know, they just like don't do a bunch of fences. So if you do have a
Mhm.
child that elopes, I can see that being, pretty scary, being at a really big playground and seeing them all the way on the other side, knowing that, they might just run into the parking lot. Uh,
Mhm.
which I mean, as a parent, and how many times I've asked them not to run into the street, it's yeah, that is a very terrifying thought. But yeah, I cannot wait to check out your rubric that you've made for inclusive playgrounds and to
Yeah.
hopefully check out are all these playgrounds that you've looked at more like near the Seattle area?
Yeah, there's some kind of that go kind of north towards Everett and a few that are south towards Tacoma, but it's kind of the ones that we've been able to stop and check out just kind
Yeah.
of on the weekends.
Did you get to see Penny Playground?
Which one's that?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know where it is.
No,
The
okay.
when when we were first getting ready to move to Washington, we
Mhm.
like drove up to check out all the different cities. Um, and it was, I mean, I want to say it was like maybe 2 hours away from Seattle.
Mhm.
But it was just one of those random, like we were driving, the kids were getting just really hyper in the back seat, and I'm like, okay, let me just find a playground and we'll pull over.
Mhm.
And I just Googled playground and we pulled over and it was just like, I mean, it's a beautiful, inclusive playground. I'm pretty sure it's not fenced in. Maybe it is, but there's just like big openings again.
Mhm.
But beautiful playground. Like so many swing options, so many like just different toys and
Mhm.
they had a lot of like button pressing music stuff. It ended up being like such a cool experience that we like randomly fell
Yeah, cool.
into. But I don't remember where it is. So
I'll have
not
to
helpful, not
I'll have to
helpful at
try to
all.
seek it out. Yeah. Yeah, and I guess the other thing about the my reviews is they do go beyond the playground itself. Like I'll even review like the bathrooms for
Yes.
accessibility because um, one thing I kind of made recently a point of is if the men's restroom doesn't have a changing table, I
Yes.
consider the whole park to not have them because I'm often with my children at the park. And if I go into the restroom and there isn't a change table, then that doesn't help me if there is one in the other one.
Yeah.
Or, the best ones are when they have the family restrooms that have like a really big change table, but that's harder to do when like in retrofit situations. So
Yeah.
that's the thing that I look for as well.
I think that's great. And that you were talking about parking and making sure that you could get to the playground in an
Yep.
accessible way. Like,
Hmm.
what's the point of having an accessible playground if you can't step over the curb to enjoy it? Like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Such a miss.
bathrooms. So I'm so
Yeah.
glad you brought that up because yeah, that's a huge, I follow a couple families who have older kids who still need their diapers changed. And they're like,
Hmm.
when we show up and it's just like a small dingy, like
Hmm.
can't really hold a lot of weight baby changing table. They're like, now we have to walk all the way back to our car so we can make sure we can safely change our child.
Right.
Um, so
Yeah,
yeah,
it's a
that's so
dignity
good.
thing, regardless of the age of the kid, it's a dignity thing where
Yes.
they deserve to have as much privacy in a stall as anyone else. Um, I was actually at a park the other day and I noticed that they had one of those really cool electric changing tables, um, that are, really fancy and large, but it was in the middle of the like space where like the sinks and stuff are. So
Oh,
who would ever use that in the middle of
yeah.
the space, like on a busy day with people coming in and out and like being in the way of other stalls and stuff? Like, um, there's got to be a better way. I mean, there's no dignity in that location of that changing table. Like,
Yeah.
who would do that?
And I wonder how expensive those are compared to the other ones. Like I even now am I'm wondering, you know, how much more do they like upcharge these changing tables for older kids just because
Hmm.
they can?
Yeah,
Um, yeah. I guess we're just gonna have to like slowly dismantle the economy together. I guess that's the next step. It's easy, right?
yeah. I think it's
Maybe
really
that's
just
the problem with businesses.
calling out people too is the best we can. I think some people kind of get um, stuck in this sort of mindset that they're doing a good thing for people, but the sort of good deed sort of also should include how much you're charging for it. And
Yeah.
these companies like there's really innovative companies that are creating some amazing stuff, but they don't need to be making as much profit. I know there's R&D and I know there's marketing and there's all those other things, but um, th there's got to be a way to be able to like provide these essential things for people,
Yeah.
without uh, gouging, because not everything's very little things are covered by insurance, and so
Yeah.
it's coming directly out of your pocket,
I feel
or
like if
or
anybody,
companies or jurisdictions and parks and stuff like it's expensive, and
yeah.
people don't have budgets for these extravagant parks everywhere, but they're needed for sure.
Yeah. Well, I feel like if anybody were to be able to figure out exactly how much everything should cost, it would be you. Seem very detailed with like you want to know like exactly the information that is
Hmm.
coming in. Because I feel like I wing it a little too much. I'm like, well, I don't know. Well, it's plus or minus $10. Let's just keep going.
Hmm.
Which I would not say is good. I think that's where I lack my patience. I have a lot of patience for children,
Hmm.
not so much with adults and adult problems. But thank you so much for coming on here and talking to
Of
me
course.
because I just feel like I learned so much from you and I can't wait to check out your website more, and your book. And I can't wait to share your information with people. I just feel like this is just so great and
Yeah, I appreciate that.
really the positive story I needed today. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you everyone for listening. Again, all of the information will be down in the show notes below, and I hope you have a great holiday season. Happy everything. I don't know. Inclusion starts with you, and I just want to help. Have a good day.